First of all, how many of you have seen the photograph over here? A couple? Somewhat familiar? Well, in February of 1860.
Hold the mic up closer.
Okay.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Don't anybody get closer to me. I've been fighting a cold for a couple days, so I don't want to spread my germs around. Anyway, in the fall of February of 1860, there was a failed congressman from rural Illinois who came east. Now, he had served one term in Congress, lost his bid for re-election largely because of his opposition to the Mexican War, and served in the Illinois legislature, and eventually, in 1858, ran against Stephen Douglas for the Senate seat from Illinois, and he lost the election. But in February of 1860, he came east and gave a speech at the Cooper Union in New York City, where he outlined his position on slavery and a number of other issues. But while he was in New York, he visited Matthew Brady's studio. And Matthew Brady took that portrait of Lincoln. Now, does anybody have a $5 bill? Wait, but a bunch of cheap Pennsylvania Dutchmen.
Here's a $5.
All right,
You all set?
that's a Matthew Brady portrait. That is. Okay. Now, do you know how Yogi never said half the things he said? Matthew Brady never took half the pictures that he took.
Steve, eat the mic, they can't hear you.
Okay. Like I said, Yogi never said half the things he said, and Matthew Brady never took half the pictures that he took. But he owned the studio, so they all went out under his name.
No.
Buy some cough drops.
Okay, thanks. Okay, a couple things about that, and I hope that at some point you'll come up here and take a good look at it. Now remember, it's February of 1860. You've probably never seen a picture of Lincoln. Right? This one didn't exist yet. Now, if you look at that, you can see that his left hand is on two books. What do you think the books are?
Bible
and the law book.
Bible and the law book? By the way, I don't know what they were. Okay. But that's not the point. The point is, what do you, viewing the picture, think they were? And how does that help you develop an impression of Lincoln? This is propaganda. Okay? A couple other things. If you'll notice, there's a pillar in the background. Most of you can't see it, but again, come up later and take a look and you can see it. Okay. They didn't have electric lights in 1860. So if you wanted to put a photographer's studio in a building, you would put it on one of the upper floors and then you'd put skylights in. Okay, so that's what was happening here. Brady's studio was on the 6th floor of the building, which was pretty tall back then. And what's that tell you about the pillar?
It's fake.
It's fake.
It's a prop.
Yeah, it's a prop.
It's a prop.
Yeah, let's be nice about it. It was a prop. Okay. But again, what kinds of buildings had pillars like that? Government buildings, courthouses, university buildings.
Masonic temples.
Excuse me?
Masonic temples.
Masonic temple. All right, so again, how does that help you form an opinion of Lincoln? This is not some country bumpkin from Illinois, right? This is a man with some gravitas. This is a man who's got some presence, who's serious. So, like I said, please come up later and take a look at that. And I'll see if I can. Here we go. Okay, let me just give you a few pieces
Steve,
of
can you make it
background
go full
information.
screen so we can see it better?
Gene,
Yeah, there should be a button.
How about at the top?
there we go. Okay, all right. The Civil War officially started on April 12, 1861 with the firing on Fort Sumter and ended almost 4 years to the day later. Again, officially at Appomattox Courthouse. There was some fighting after that, especially in Texas and New Mexico and a few places in the West. But I think for our purposes, we can say that it ended with Lee's surrender. Okay. The issues, well, it depends who you talk to. Slavery, states' rights, the westward expansion, vision for the nation. You know, what kind of a nation would we be? There were approximately between 620,000 and 750,000 people killed by bullets in the war. Those are soft numbers. The 620,000, I think, is from the National Park Service. And I've seen other estimates that are a lot higher. But one of the things to remember is that for every person killed by a bullet, 2 people died of disease. Now, if you want to put that into perspective, okay, versus today's population, we'd be looking at probably 6 or 7 million people dead. Okay. Key battles, Bull Run, Shiloh. Antietam will talk about Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, which I hope you know. Okay. Some of the advances. Wars are often accompanied by technological advances. So if you think about World War II, for example, we have atomic weapons, we also have computers. Basically because of World War II. For the Civil War, the rifled musket, the ironclad warship, I remember a few nights ago watching something on one of the mystery channels on TV, and they said, you know, after the Monitor and the Virginia fought, every navy in the world was suddenly obsolete. Railroads, nursing, since my wife is here today, and was here a month ago talking about Civil War medicine. That was a very important thing. Now, the U.S. Civil War was not the first war where nursing played a role, where photography played a role, or where railroads were important. Say that fast 3 times. That distinction, I think, would probably have to go to the Crimean War. Okay. Some of the things that came out of it. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. What does the 13th Amendment say?
Abolish slavery.
Abolish slavery. Okay. No slavery or involuntary servitude. 14th Amendment. Ooh, that's a tough one.
Birthright citizenship.
Okay.
Equal
Equal,
protection.
what's that?
Equal protection under the
Equal
law.
protection under the law. 15th Amendment.
Suffrage.
So,
Yes.
yeah, right, women's,
Universal male suffrage. Okay. Music of the Civil War, if you want, I can inflict a whole bunch of stuff on you about that. Also the Transcontinental Railroad, the Homestead Act, the Morrill Act. Anybody know what the Morrill Act was?
Set up land grant colleges.
Land grant colleges. Of which
Penn State.
Penn
the
State.
best one is? The best one is from New York,
New York? Oh, you mean college?
Land Grant College.
Anyways,
Cornell.
I was just gonna say it.
Shelby Foote, do you know who he is? He says that the Union fought the Civil War with one hand behind its back. And I think this is what he meant. That at the same time they were fighting the Civil War, they were doing all this other stuff. When was the Pony Express? Anybody know?
1845, around there.
1860.
1862,
oh,
less than a year. But it's right in the middle of the Civil War.
really good stuff there, all this stuff is on.
Okay, so if I may, let me take you back a little bit and give you some background on the photography. This is the earliest known photograph. It's from about 1822, maybe 1826. I've seen a couple different dates. Taken by a guy named Nicephore Niepce in Chalon-sur-Saône, France.
It's on this side of
He used a process known as bitumen of Judea. Does anybody know what bitumen is?
Tar.
Tar. Asphalt.
Wow.
So, I don't know what the chemistry was. But if the bitumen was exposed to light, it would harden, and the stuff that wasn't exposed could be washed away. Oh, by the way, his exposure time on this was about 8 hours. And the camera he used had been built by a friend of his. And I've got some more things here where I'll show you what a camera obscura is.
Oh,
There.
wow.
If you have a room, okay, we've got a room, and there's a very small hole here in the wall. And something that's brightly lit outside will get projected through the hole against whatever is inside. That's what's known as a camera obscura. Any Latin scholars here can tell me what camera obscura means.
Obscure.
Dark room. Not dark room, one word. Dark or hidden room.
Obscure. Oh, yeah.
So you have a box with a hole in it.
Gee whiz.
Anybody know what that is?
Well, for me, it's cardio mobile.
Okay, well,
It's the camera that you have.
okay. Well, this is an iPhone, obviously, and it's the most popular camera ever invented. I think we can say that. But it's also a box with a hole in it. So, you know, you can put a lens over the hole and maybe capture more light, make things brighter inside. Or with a zoom lens, you know, you can do all sorts of things about where you're going to take a picture of, and whether that's going to be in focus or out of focus. But that's the idea behind the camera obscura. Okay, now, this is from Leonardo's sketchbook, and you can see that he understood the principle. And no, not Leonardo DiCaprio. Now what happens is that the image gets projected against whatever the back wall is, only it's upside down and flipped left to right. It's upside down and backwards. Now, there are about half a dozen room-size camera obscuras in the world today. There's the most famous one is probably the Radcliffe camera at Oxford University. There's another one in downtown Edinburgh, Scotland. There's another one somewhere around San Francisco. If you go up to the George Eastman Museum in Rochester, what they did there was they were using George Eastman's mansion, and there was a closet with a window. So they just took black paper and covered the window with the black paper and put a little tiny hole in the black paper. That was their camera obscura. But here you can see that the light would come into the box. They have mirrors here and it get reflected up here, and then you could draw a picture based on that. And really, most of photography then is really about how do you capture that image? Okay. Now, the camera obscura was used in art, definitely by Vermeer, probably also by Caravaggio. Did anybody see the movie, The Girl with the Pearl Earring? Okay. Remember when she saw the image that came out of the camera obscura, she freaked out. All right. This is from Thomas Jefferson's study in Monticello, New York. So he had one. There's the lens. And again, it would come through there, get reflected up. Now, I mentioned Niepce. He had a pupil named Louis-Jacques Mondet Daguerre, who invented a process known as the daguerreotype. And this is the oldest known photograph with a human being in it. You can see maybe right down there. See that? It's a guy getting his shoes shined. here's the daguerreotype process would have been a lot of fun too, because what you would do is you would take a piece of metal, probably brass or copper, and then you would coat that with silver and polish that to a very high degree using rotten stone or I forget what the other thing was, but I do know you can get all the bits and pieces for this from Walmart. Yeah. Try to remember that as well. That's known as a posing stand. Ah, okay. No, it looks like some sort of medieval torture device. But the idea was that those arms would hold you around the waist and also around the head, and then that way you could stay still for a couple minutes. Then, the photographer would take that plate after he had exposed the picture in the camera, and they would develop it using mercury vapor. Ooh, okay. Now, have any of you ever heard of the Mad Hatter? Okay, where does that come from?
Making hats.
Mercury poisoning from hat making.
Yeah. Yeah, they would use mercury, especially in hat bands, and people would inhale the mercury. That would kill brain cells. So they would go crazy. Hence, the Mad Hatter. I don't know whether or not they have anything about mad photographers. Okay. This is the oldest photograph in the U.S. There's one of those big bronze markers on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia where this was taken. It's of Central High School.
Class of 1839.
So 1839. Now, Samuel Morse. What did he invent? Morse code. What was Morse code used in? Telegraph. And, okay, now Morse had been trained as a portrait painter. And he went to France to work on his patents for the telegraph. And while he was there, Daguerre showed him the daguerreotype process, and he brought it back stateside. In fact, the story that I heard is that while Morse was meeting with Daguerre, they brought word that Daguerre's studio had burned down. I don't know whether that's true or not. Okay. Now, at the same time in England, a guy named William Henry Fox Talbot was developing another process which he called the calotype. Now, Fox Talbot lived in Wiltshire. Anybody here familiar enough with English geography to tell me where Wiltshire is and what else is there?
Stonehenge.
Stonehenge. So you have London here and Wiltshire sort of here, and then a couple counties over is Dorset. Now this one I don't expect you to know. Does anybody know what's in Dorset? Sheep, yes. Also, the town of Whitcomb.
Oh, jeez.
Um, Now, one of the things that Talbot was known for is what's known now as the Talbot effect. And that is if we shine light through a gradient, it comes out in a pattern. You see how the pattern repeats itself, but it's sort of offset? And the distance there is based on the focal length of the light. And this has applications in things like fractals and a whole bunch of other things that I'm not going to pretend to understand. But he called this the calotype process. Now, in 1838, the French government bought Daguerre's patents. And they said, this is France's gift to the world. Anybody at all can use this without paying a royalty, except in England. We're not going to let them do it. But the calotype process from about 1838 had one big advantage over daguerreotypes, and that is it's a negative process. Okay, so the first one that you make comes out all reversed. The dark stuff is light and the light stuff is dark.
Yeah.
So if you want to make additional copies, what do? You just repeat it. And you can just keep repeating it until the cows come home. Whereas with a daguerreotype, which is a positive process, if you want to make another one, you can't do it. You have to take another picture.
So what was the substrate that calotype used?
Initially, he used paper. What he did was he took paper and like painted that with a silver bromide solution. Okay. But all of the fibers and the imperfections and everything else that would have been in the paper would have been in the negative and then would have been carried over to any prints that you made. So it could be very soft, very sort of not quite in focus. But there you can see. Now, I'm not going to ask that question. Anyway, all chemical photography today uses basically that same process that Fox Talbot came up with. You know, like I said, Fox Talbot lived in a place called in Wiltshire, in a place called Laycock Abbey. They tell me that some of the scenes from the Harry Potter movies were filmed there. I don't know which ones. You'd have to ask my granddaughter. But Morse brought daguerreotypes back to the U.S., and one of his pupils was this guy, Matthew Brady. who worked under Samuel Morse. He initially made cases for daguerreotypes. See if I've got something here that I can show you. See. Now, the silver background that this is based on is very soft. You can actually scratch silver with your fingernail. No, it's right there. Okay. So that's one of the reasons for the case. So Brady actually started out making cases for Morse, for the daguerreotypes. And he started out and started making the images himself. Those were shown at an exhibition in London in 1851, and they were seen there by a guy named Alexander Gardner, and we'll get to him in a few minutes. But Brady owned a studio in New York, and what he would do is he would take a photograph of the rich and the famous, and then he'd charge you a few cents if you wanted to come in and see them. So, we talked about this a few minutes ago. Here are some other Matthew Brady portraits. The far left, who's that?
Booth.
Oh,
That's
Well,
Booth,
that's it.
Bentley, and
Looks good. I'm amazed how many people, when I do this at a place called Quiet Valley up around Stroudsburg,